Welcome back to episode 2 of Risk Takers and Trailblazers Women in Insurance and InsurTech podcast. We are joined with hosts Diane, Jen, and Helen. We have a combined 80 years of insurance experience in almost every facet, from customer service, sales, ops, marketing, communications, and of course the tech side of things. Today is a very special episode because we are joined with none other than Jenn Devlin, who is the founder and president of Sauce Recruitment. And this is really cool because Jen's career was actually planted in insurance. So she has that firsthand experience and really understands the ins and outs of the business to really inform her recruitment business. So thank you, Jen. Welcome to the pod. And let's start by just tell us a little bit about yourself, Jen.
Sure. Thank you for having me. It's exciting that you guys are on this new venture, which I can, appreciate a little bit, just having started my own business just over 5 years ago. I'm an insurance professional, I would say, by background, and I've been in the industry for, it's crazy to think that it's over 25 years. Seems way too long, but sort of like navigated my way through the insurance industry to entrepreneurship and opening Sauce Recruitment. I have a small team. We work in Calgary, Alberta, and really focus predominantly on servicing the Western provinces. We support the insurance industry exclusively. Most of what we do is focused on supporting commercial focused roles in the insurance industry. And we are recruiters. So we basically are, headhunters for insurance talent. And our role is to find and scout the best talent for our clients.
Amazing. And so, Jen, how did you go from being in insurance to founding your own recruitment company? What was that like?
So in recounting my own insurance and just career path, I guess, overall, I realized that I'm quite a storyteller. So I started telling the story back to myself, and I realized that if I went into all the detail that I like to give with, names and dates and circumstances and secret handshakes, it would probably take me like an hour. But what I did realize, in going from career step to career step, that there were definitely like common themes that I gathered along the way. And in my case, it was almost like an intuitive process that I worked through on my own. Because when I look back at my own career history, the ability for me to like draw on my own personal experiences and share with those that I'm helping navigate their own careers now, it's just weird how like the universe sort of prepares you for your future. And sometimes you don't even recognize that that's going to happen. So I went through and I pulled out a few different common themes with what led me to where I am today. So I would just give like a more general overview than specifics. But what I would say is that, so my career has been 25 years long, roughly, so far. I've held 9 positions in 25 years, which seems like a lot. 3 different industries, sort of related, the way that I navigated from industry to industry, and 3 different cities. And so in those 9 positions that I held, 2 of them are what I call transition jobs. These were really jobs that I took once when moving from Prince George to Victoria, and the other time moving from Victoria to Calgary. These were positions that I took because I knew that I wanted to resettle in a different location. And in order to move, I needed to find a job. And so sometimes, like they say, is he Mr. Right or Mr. Right now? Like sometimes you have to just decide that Mr. Right now is okay. And those 2 roles I took, with the intention of continuing my career there as long as it worked out. But ultimately, when I landed in those new cities and I navigated the cities and the reasons why I moved to those cities, the places that I landed initially just they didn't ring true to why I had moved there. And so I ended up being there for very short term. And one of the careers that I had within that 25-year span was an 8-year tenure with one employer. So it's very interesting to see and to try to recognize like what keeps you at a company, what makes you change. But ultimately, I always loved the people part of the insurance industry, and I loved the way that people from all different walks of life and educational backgrounds could submerge in the same place and create totally different career paths for themselves.
Yeah, love that.
So I think that what ended up happening really that got me into recruitment was I was having lunch with a past colleague, and he had started telling me about a mutual friend who had started a recruitment firm in Vancouver that was insurance focused. And I still remember the restaurant that we were sitting at, and it was just like, that was my light bulb moment. I was like, I just said out loud, I need to be an insurance recruiter. This is taking all of the information that I've had from working at like 5 different types of organizations, gathering my networking passion and like my ability to really ask difficult questions and learn about people really quickly, and turn it into a different career path. I always loved insurance, but I also sort of wondered, like, where am I going to go next? And I was just never pacified with what I was doing. And for me, you know, that wasn't okay. So I just took the leap of faith and jumped in with both feet to do something different. And that was almost 10 years ago now. So
amazing.
Congratulations. Though, because then it's not all those different positions were just stepping stones that you needed to get
totally. Yes. So the pieces of like the common themes, I guess, as I went through those different journeys from place to place, and also like navigating from different industry to industry. And I think that you know, some people on the podcast too have almost done that in terms of either total industry shifts or moving to a different part of the industry. You really need to be inquisitive. So there were 4 points that I really thought have allowed me not really like to come to my success, but to be able to control my destiny a little bit, in terms of like, I've always felt like I was the one getting to the next step on purpose. So the first thing is like, your network will serve you. Of those 9 positions, only 1 position I applied for where I didn't know anybody at the organization, and it was very early in my career. It was an application to a different city, and that's the only position that I didn't navigate to through some type of a connection that I had already had. The other thing is just being inquisitive, like asking questions if you're interested in something, and making people aware of your curiosities. It's just all about communication and letting other people know that you're interested, because if they don't hear that from you, they just sort of assume that you're happy where you are. And
that's a great point. That's a great point, Jen.
The other 2, share your story. And I know it's not easy for everyone. Like, communication does not come easy to everyone. Talking about yourself does not come easy to everyone. But if you're able to connect with other people, especially in a professional services industry, where what we do and where we gravitate to is so much about human connection and the network that we have, like, you need to engage with being vulnerable yourself and sharing about yourself for other people to then share with you. And I mean, that's really like what networking is it's just relationship building. So you need to open up in order for people to know what's different about you, right? And like why they want to be around you and get to know you a little bit more. And just being your own best advocate. That's point number 4. Again, not easy for everyone to talk about themselves, to highlight things about themselves that people may not know. But the more that you can get in there and make your own story unique and genuine, the more you will stand out to others, and be memorable, I think.
Let's unpack that, Jen, because you just gave us 4 really good nuggets of advice right there. So I think it's really hard, and I know we've discussed this in our pre-interview. I think it can be really hard for people out there who are shy or have social anxiety or who suffer from imposter syndrome to really put their self out there in terms of advocating for themselves, but also networking can be terrifying. So what are some of the things someone who maybe is a bit more timid or has a lot of self-doubt, do you think they could start practicing? Like, what are some steps they can take to kind of really grow their network and grow their self-confidence to self-advocate for themselves?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that trying to be vocal about your own curiosities might actually be an easier starting point than actually talking about yourself.
Yeah.
And so if you're at the point where you're more often than not just sort of like an information, you're soaking up information, but you're not asking a lot of questions, you're not putting your hand up, maybe just start inquiring about other people. Like, people in general really love talking about themselves if they're asked questions. And so I think that if you start by just trying to vocalize your curiosities, that will break the ice and start a conversation. So I think that's like a good first step in interacting really and getting to know other people.
Do you, Jen, do you think making some of that more of a personal connection, do you think that eases some of that icebreaker? Like bringing in some of your own personal, like you said, ask those questions, but really bring it back to you as that individual to help make those connections. Yeah,
like just in terms of, you mean like sharing, I mean, they're all kind of related to each other, right? Like being inquisitive, sharing your story, advocating for yourself, all of the points that I mentioned, I believe are just all about getting to know people and really like strengthening your communication skills. And so, yes, I don't think that you need to
overshare.
Need to make, it kind of sort of goes into the next like topic of the networking conversation specifically, but I think that depending on where you are and what environment you're in would lend the way that you handle that in a different way. So if you were, at like a roundtable business discussion with people you'd never met before, you probably wouldn't start by asking personal questions. But if you're, in a room of people that you've met a few times before, then yeah, I think that that's an easy thing. Where do you have any vacations planned for this year? Or how did you get from being a broker into an account executive? Or I've always been curious about what drives people to make their own career changes. And so I guess I'm just always wondering about so many things. I just kind of have that tendency to blurt out questions, but I don't think that you can be penalized for it or thought of poorly just for asking a question. So I wouldn't be too guarded with it. Personal business, anything goes. Ask them the name of their pet. People love showing pictures of their animals.
It's true. It's so true. Pets and kids.
Right. And I think that's the great tip to take away from that really is, take the risk, which we've talked about, through imposter syndrome podcasts and group discussions, which was
never recorded.
I remember I was having a dinner early in my career. When I worked at Marsh, there was a lot of external socializing and insurance markets that would come in from out of town. And this was like a whole new world to me. Being in Calgary to me was a big city at that point. And I remember this man came up from the United States. I don't remember which company he was with, but he was very into US politics and really wanted to talk about the government and everything else. And honestly, like I live in this world right here. Like I'm all about who I'm talking to right now. And I'm hyper focused on like the micro, I think. And so he was just going on and on about the politics and I had nothing to say back. I was so uncomfortable. And I just asked him straight up, like I said, can we talk about something else? And he said, well, what would you want to talk about? And I said, I don't know, hypothetical events. And so he, we did, like, we totally changed the topic to something non-business related, non-personal related. It was just fun getting to know each other as people. And I think that that's kind of a deterrent or uncomfortable when people are in the insurance industry and there is like this hierarchy, especially at networking events, about like who's above you, who's below you. And it feels like you need to impress impress your
Yeah.
seniors. But at the end of the day, like, we're really just all people. And I think that we just need to remember that and not be so hard on ourselves.
I said something, Jen, in our pre-interview that we've actually talked about after. We were telling you things about like Tanya and I having, imposter syndrome and how we feel, and you were like, I just can't connect with the things you guys are saying. And afterwards, we're like, gosh, that's gotta be so freeing, just to be like,
Yeah.
I can be my own cheerleader. I can do all that stuff.
That's the thing that I'm thinking about even now, which is like, what's the worst that's going to happen?
Totally.
Said that to us, Jen.
Yeah.
And because you're right, like if you go for that promotion or you ask for that raise or you want to switch jobs, like what is the worst that's going to happen is your boss says no raise, or you don't get that promotion, or you move to that job, it doesn't work out, and you said usually the other job will take you back or you'll find something else, but it's not the end of the world. And so like
it's so weird to me, like how as individuals, I guess you're a result of your environment or whatever that slogan is, but we're all so different.
Mm-hmm.
But why are we all trying to be the same? I guess I'm kind of
100%.
I think about that a lot because being in a spot where I am a little bit more of an extrovert, I've always been comfortable asking those weird questions. And don't get me wrong, like if I'm sitting in a boardroom meeting of 12 to 14 people, I get nervous to speak up and ask a question, but I will always make myself ask the question. But why are some people comfortable doing that and other people just cannot stomach it? It's just such an interesting phenomenon that unfortunately in the business world, if you don't get over that fear, you can kind of get lost in the shuffle unless somebody, takes you under their wing almost and really like carries you along.
You're absolutely right about that. And going back to the questions, like asking questions, I don't know if anybody on this call knows how I got my marketing gig, because I was a broker. I was like, it was 2013. It was I was a couple months into the job working for Sharp Insurance as an account manager. And I asked Sharif the simple question, why are our TBWs written so poorly? I'm like, is this the brand reputation you want to give to our clients? Like there's misspellings, there's grammar errors. He's like, on the spot, he's like, congratulations, you're now our communications person. Like just on the spot.
Awesome.
And I know that's a very rare occurrence, but I mean, and as a leader now, when someone even from a different department asks me really thoughtful questions about what we do, I remember them. And then I'll ask them more. Like I'll be like, oh, this person asked me about this thing that went out and they had some really good insight. I'm going to ask them again and I'm going to ask them again. And you start to notice them. So even if maybe networking isn't your strong suit and you're an introvert like me, and you rehearse every conversation in your head 20 times, ask questions, even if it's just one-on-one and where you feel safer and you're not in a big crowd, you will stand out. You will definitely stand out.
Absolutely. I agree.
So I think, or just something that you guys touched on there that I think is interesting is that, I think part of what we want the audience to know is that if you're, really extroverted, I don't even know if that's the right word. I think that I kind of resonate with that too, Jen, whereas, I wouldn't like, even if I was nervous or scared, I still don't feel good about leaving that situation without and it's not even a contribution thing, it's more about it's a curiosity thing, right? So I'm almost willing to embarrass myself is not have the question asked or pick thing apart, right? So I think what's interesting is that we're all not going to be the same personality. That's just not going to happen. But I think these tools to your point, Tanya, is saying like, start somewhere, right? Start that smaller group. It's funny that you got that position because anybody that knows you and you're crossing T's and dotting I's, or that whole story is funny to me because it's so fitting, right? But yeah, it's just starting somewhere. And I think that that can help break you out of the shell. But I also think like you can't really, I think that you can't really fake it in a sense. I think that we're in a world right now where networking is so public compared to what it used to be. And you can really start to tell the individuals that are, you know, thinking about this stuff off hours, right? Or just have that natural drawn to curiosity. Hey, I got to meet with this person. I want to know more about what they did and how they did it and what drives them and all that stuff, right?
Absolutely.
I think that I hadn't actually thought of this until just now, but the difference in the business climate being even like with a hybrid work environment and some companies being completely remote, it's very different than all hands on deck in the office every day, like very different. I mean, if you want to equate it to my mother-in-law trying to phone us, you know, she's always like, well, I was going to call you, but I thought you might be eating dinner. And I was going to call you, but I thought you might be doing this. And people don't want to be like invasive of other people's times. They don't want to be interrupt. And so in a remote environment, you wouldn't just like log in, create a Zoom link, get in touch with your person to be like, hey, this orange is really good. And like, oh, you had the last time you had an orange, you were in Hawaii and like your kids were surfing with the sharks. Oh my gosh, what are their names? Like the interactions that I was able to have internally working in a big company like Marsh that were just casual, getting to know you conversations were invaluable. Like people that I met there, and it's been over 10 years since I've even been at that company, I just know them still. I keep in touch with them. We all got to know each other on such a personal level. And it's sort of a segue, I guess, into the networking like conversation, but I really started thinking about my network and all those jobs that I've had. And the network that I relied on for all of those career moves, except for the one that I applied for, and two others that I still networked to get, but they weren't internal. They were all people that I had met at a company that I worked at. They were not people that I met at networking events or people that I met from being on the board at WIC or participating in the IPC or whatever, you know, industry functions and clubs are out there. They were just people who I worked with as colleagues and got to know. And those are the people, because of the industry being so, like, I don't want to say transient, but, you know, people move around a lot.
Yeah.
And if you just get to know the people in your own organization where you're comfortable, that will indirectly just create your network, because they will then go to all of the other companies and then more people will come to your company and then more people will leave. And so even if you just do a really great job of getting to know your colleagues,
Yes.
that is a fantastic base for a great network.
Amazing.
Period.
That is a great point. I personally miss the big office environments. I miss, you know, we're pretty much like hybrid, almost fully remote, but I remember what you're talking about. I mean, I'm talking like even 10 years ago, when even working from home because someone, and I'm not saying this is the answer, because someone was sick, kids are sick or whatever. But I mean, I met my husband at work. I mean, I had people come, my bosses came to our wedding. Like there is some of my best friends of all times. Like it's so different.
It's different.
Yeah.
So, okay. So we do the networking, we build these relationships, we go for the job. Here's what's on a lot of our minds. How do we negotiate? Like what is a do's and don'ts for they're offering you the role that you want? What are some things you can negotiate and how would you go about negotiating?
I mean, like, there's really only so many things I think you can negotiate that are sort of like standard across industry, because every company has maybe like little nuances and benefits that they offer that others don't. But ultimately it's like the basics of wage, benefit start date, and vacation. I think that those would be like the three most important pieces of putting your compensation package together. So definitely, the negotiation may take a slightly different form depending on the company that you're speaking with. Sometimes companies want to arrive on an agreement before they send you a formal offer. I think that it just really reduces the back and forth of the paperwork of signing and revising documents, etc. So depending on the comfort level and the way that the offer comes together, you just always make sure that you counter on something, because I don't think that most employers out of the gate would make their first offer their best and final. In some cases that does happen, but usually that in advance.
Okay, so I want to pause there because I know there are people listening who would just take that first offer because, and again, and we're going to bring back imposter syndrome. I'm going to take it before they take it away. I'm just going to say yes. I don't want them to change their mind. But I remember in the pre-interview, Jen, you said negotiating, they rarely take an offer back. I mean, right? Like,
that is not means for rescinding an offer. And I think also, like, if you really consider that we are in the insurance industry and negotiation is one of the predominant skills that most employers want you to have, not in every position, but in a good chunk of them. So if your job entails any type of negotiation, whether it be with a market or a client or a vendor, I think that it's just only makes you shine a little bit more if you do come back and advocate for yourself. I think that it shows confidence. And as long as you're reasonable with your negotiation, I mean, hopefully by the time you receive a verbal offer, you know the wage range of the role and you're at least going to be in the same ballpark. So I'd say that I wouldn't really say that there's like a standard for how much you should ask for back. It kind of depends on, what you feel the role is worth. Maybe it comes down to what you're making right now, although I don't love that as a benchmark, because if you're being underpaid, then why should you just go for, 10% more when maybe your peer is earning 20% more in that role? So, do you have the loyalty discount? This is like the term that one of my best friends in the industry came up with after spending many, many years with the same company. You get those tiny incremental increases over the years. And then when you do decide to make a move, like you should be expecting probably a 15 to 20% increase, I bet. It's far more common for people who have worked at the same company for a very long time to be slightly underpaid than those who make a move every 2 to 4 years, because they're always kind of like catching up with a little bit more.
Yes. 100%.
So I think one of the things, Jen, that you're saying that I think I've heard now a couple times that I think is really interesting for the audience is like this self-advocacy, okay? Getting to self-advocacy, but also making sure that it's reasonable and balanced and backed up, right? But by not so much, not from a proving perspective, because I think that kind of starts to lend more into the imposter syndrome, but more of what is a right fit for me, right?
Yeah.
I think there's something in there, whereas, I even speaking for myself in my own role, like I can tell the different candidates that apply that are really like putting themselves first in a reasonable way, right? Really almost interviewing us in the same way that we're interviewing them. And I like that, right?
I think that like, depending on where you're going in your career and what that next step is, really does change your negotiating power. I believe in fair negotiation.
Yeah.
And so depending on, how difficult is it to fill the role? How long has the role been open for? Where are you in your career and what type of value do you bring? I mean, if you're earning, a certain amount in your current role, then your employer has deemed that you're worth that much money. And one thing that I find, like there are definite differences, I say with a broad brush, between negotiation between men and women. So it's so common for me to interview women, and the first thing that they say to me after they tell me their wage is, but I'm willing to be flexible. You know, so what do you need to move forward into this role? Well, you know, I'm currently making, let's say it's a higher level position. I'm currently making 160, but I'm willing to be flexible. And I said, why? No man has ever said that. Why are you saying that? And they say, well, I don't know, because I don't want to reduce the number of opportunities that are available to me.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, but why? Like, why do you think that that's going to reduce the number of opportunities? I mean, it's not usually the first thing, at least as a recruiter, that we talk about. It's not usually wage.
Right.
I mean, you have to know like that they're in the right range, because if it's too far apart, then it is just not a good fit. But you're being paid this much right now for a reason. It's because you're worth it, and you've worked really hard to get there. And so why would you decide to be flexible or, you know, take a step back? Like, maybe if you exhaust your search and you don't have a job and you have to work, okay, yes. But if you're employed, then just be patient.
That's good advice. That's
very good advice. What is your, I mean, I don't even know if you cross over into this kind of like realm with individuals or females or mothers, but do you find that the whole mother thing, the whole being a, you know, the whole kid thing is, do you find that comes into the play of I'm willing to be flexible? Like, do you find that there is this notion of I'm willing to be flexible because, you know, we're both working, I'm a mother, or I'm even a single mother. Like, do you find that any of that comes into the play of I'm flexible, or no, you don't really cross over to that realm?
No, not really. Like, the people who are in the throes of motherhood usually are not the most senior in the industry.
Right.
And so I would say that more often when we're talking about like the need for flexibility as a mother is more about like the hours of work, or like, is the position hybrid, or, you know, I really, I don't want to move to a new employer right now because, you know, I know that I have I know I have flexibility where I work currently.
Yeah.
And my comment always is, like, I've worked at a lot of places and all of my employers have been flexible because I'm an awesome employee and I work really hard and get my job done.
Right.
And so as long as you do that, you should have no problem in like picking your kid up because it's parent teacher, or you need to go to soccer, or they have a dentist appointment. But you just need to value your employer's time. And so the one thing I would suggest, and this isn't so much about negotiating as it is about like more of the beginnings of the interview process, no matter where you are, I feel like I'm going to start singing a song. No matter where you've been, like, don't ask the employer what the hours of operation are in your first interview. If the number one thing for you is that you have to work from 8 to 4, like, don't ask that question, even if that is the most important thing. You have to make the employer want you first, and then you can say, I will need a slight accommodation to work from 8 to 4. Will that be an issue? And usually I would probably say that after you received a verbal offer. Do not ask about benefits. Do not ask about pay. Do not ask about what time do I need to be at work at 8 or 8:30? No, don't do that. That will reduce your negotiating power.
Yes.
And I feel like women want to be so sure about what they're signing up for before they get loyal and before they commit, that they want to know every little detail before they even go forward for the job.
They almost don't want to like waste the time of the people. Like, I just have to get this off the people before we get further.
I see that from both men and women, I will say, but I know what you're saying. I think it's coming from I mean, maybe this is unfair to say, but I think it's coming from a certain place with female employees or mothers, or it's like this, I don't know. It's like I'm crossing all my T's before dotting my I's, making sure that this is going to be okay, which is such a stressful thing all in itself, right?
It's avoiding risk taking.
Well, that's exactly where I was going. It was like, to me, all I'm hearing is, it sounds like in this situation that we're talking about is that they want to make sure that this is not a risk, that they are not going to be disappointed, let down, have anxiety, get stressed out, all of those other things that we've talked about, right? That this is truly what's going to pan out for them, right? Because I do think it's that risk aversion, right? They're really not sure.
I think, like, so in this world of virtual, and I mean, it's networking outside of your organization too, but just because you go on, like, I know I equate everything to dating. Like, I dated a ton before I met my husband. And when I got my first recruitment job, like years before I started my own business, the principal asked me, like, why do you want to be a recruiter? And I said, well, I've always wanted to be a matchmaker. So if not for love, why not for insurance? And that was basically like what got me the job, I think. So I do think that there's a lot of similarities between dating and between getting a new job. It's like that relationship management, expectations, fear of commitment, all of that stuff. So I think, like, what I say to people a lot is, and this is not a sales tactic, but if you go to speak with an employer about a job that suits your skill set, that you could potentially be interested in, if they want to interview you, you are not wasting their time. We work in the insurance industry that is so starving for good, strong people and enough of them that you are doing them a favor by gracing them with your presence, even if you choose not to go back for a second interview. And you're networking for yourself. When in the world will you get 25 minutes of one-on-one time with a decision maker at a company that you would love to work at? So take it as a networking opportunity, if nothing else. And the times, like the work hours, I feel strongly that those questions about the tiny details, they put a different slant in your, not credibility, because everybody needs a different thing for their lifestyle and their career. That's fine. But I do personally feel the difference between asking about a work hour and not in a first interview is the difference between interviewing for a job and interviewing for a career.
Yeah, I think that's very valid. I'm sitting here reflecting on some interviews, listening to you talk about it from your perspective, and I'm rolling back in my head thinking about some interviewees I've done for different positions from sales and service and all of those things. And I think about some of those non-successful candidates versus successful candidates. And you've really helped open my eyes to go, okay, those successful ones were ones that I was able to connect with, build a relationship with. They brought themselves, their authentic selves, to the table and were able to talk about their qualities, their experiences, and all of those, versus the unsuccessfuls. And some of the ones that are top of mind are first questions out of someone's mouth, I remember specifically, were, do you pay benefits and what's involved? They wanted our benefit package up front. And I was just like,
deciding factor. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, you can feel it for sure.
Yeah.
The other thing to not be afraid about asking, so just getting back to that, like, what can you ask for? What can't you ask for? I mean, you can ask for anything, but if you're navigating multiple job offers at the same time, specifically if you've chosen to do, an active job search because you know that you're leaving your company, there's a few different reasons why you might engage in a job search, right? One is that you see an opportunity with a company that you've always wanted to work at, and like you're gunning for that role and that role alone. But the second scenario is either you found yourself in a position where you're not working, and so you're able to be a free agent and entertain multiple offers, or you are working, but you have decided that you are leaving your company. Come hell or high water, that's happening. And so you're throwing it out there to the world and you're investigating your opportunities and you're exploring. So in that case, you often come to a situation where the timing of the interviews is not perfectly aligned because of other commitments on the employer side or your side, the speed at which different employers interview and move forward. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're expecting another interview or another job offer after the date that you're supposed to sign back the first offer, you can ask them for an extension to sign that offer. 100%. They may choose not to grant it. Mm-hmm. I don't think I've ever encountered a situation where somebody has completely refused. Be mindful of the language you use when you do that, because you don't want anyone to think that they're plan B. Yeah. But make sure all that you have to say is, would you mind extending the offer for X amount of days? I'd say anything reasonable would be anything from like probably 3 to 7 days. Are you able to extend the offer so that I can like just make sure that I'm making the right decision for me and my family, or something like that? And that's all that you have to say. You don't need to elaborate, don't need to feel bad about it. If they're not comfortable with it, they will just say no, and that's the worst thing that will happen. So that's important to know. The other thing, especially coming up on bonus time, is that as a recruiter, often when I reach out to people or talk to people about a job, they always say like, oh, I'm not ready right now because I'm expecting my bonus. And so especially on the underwriting side, has a little bit more of a standardized, consistent approach to their bonus season, like what they're expecting when they get paid out. The broker side is more usually based on commission. So you may get that at different times throughout the year, or it may be some type of a discretionary bonus where you're not really sure what you're going to get. But what I always tell people is that don't ever let that be a reason why you choose not to interview for a role if you're not happy where you are. Because in almost every case, there is some type of an agreement where they will keep you whole. Like if you're the right person for the job, they will keep you whole. So regardless of if you're getting your bonus in 1 month or 3 months, you can be transparent about that fact. Again, I would say after the first interview is when you would bring it up. And then you can kind of massage and navigate start dates if that is integral. And so if you're expecting your bonus in 1 week and it's $20,000, the new employer might say, well, maybe you should wait a week before you give your notice, right? But if you're expecting your bonus in June and it's February, then that new employer will probably be, how much are you expecting for your bonus? What was your bonus the last 2 years? And let's come to an agreement where you're happy and we're happy, because there's a saying, time kills all deals. And they would rather retain your employment early than wait 3 or 4 months for you to get that bonus. So they will just basically pay your bonus as a signing bonus. So the signing bonus is something that a lot of people don't really know about or know that could be a factor. And it actually like really inhibits people from going forward for roles that they may have otherwise wanted to explore.
Amazing. That's amazing.
I have a question for you, Jen. We have a statistic that is a favorite in our group, which is the roles that women will apply for compared to when men will apply for them. So I think Tanya and Helen, you guys remember the numbers better than I do, but is it like women will only apply if they check off like 90 to 100% of the boxes, whereas men, if it's like 50 and up?
Yeah, I've heard that too.
That in your
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I've probably just sort of read in passing the same type of information, but yes, you you can definitely see that women want to be more sure in general. And again, not every woman, but want to be sure in general, want to make sure that they're going to like not be wasting people's time, that they have a really good chance of getting it, that they're confident they can do the job. Like they don't want to oversell themselves. Yeah. So when I moved from Victoria to Calgary, I did not want to work in professional services. I had spent 5 years in the insurance industry and 5 years in the wealth management industry. And I was just sort of sick of pushing paper. Like I wanted to like sell a glass or a pen. And I wanted to know like that I would make the widgets and then they would, you know, be sold and their profit would be this and like off we go. I'm quite impatient. So I applied for a few jobs and I didn't get anything. So then I thought, okay, what am I going to do? And this was in Calgary and I'd applied for a few jobs. I didn't get them. And I just said to I remember saying to my mom that morning, I went to interview for an insurance role. And I just said, like, this job that I'm going to today, like I'm getting this job. This is the one I'm just going to land. Like I need a job now. So I knew what I needed to say. And, you know, it was a good job. It was fine. But on my resume, so what I did while I was going to university was I was an ICBC auto plan agent. And it's kind of like working at the registry in Alberta, but basically like ICBC is the government insurance. We registered the plates. We put like the decals on the plates, which was one of my favorite parts. And it was just like super transactional auto insurance, blah, blah, blah. Part-time while I was in university. And also occasionally on the weekend, if the personal lines person was not there, I would have to maybe like look for an endorsement or file something or call a market to ask a question. And so, of course, on my resume, there was 4 years of insurance experience, Barton Insurance, 1996 to whatever the dates were. And, you know, auto plan, personal lines, like I barely did personal lines, but I did it. Yeah. Like I did technically do it. Yeah. And so on it went to my resume. So it rounded out my experience. And that's one thing that people should really focus on is when they're applying for jobs, like what have you done and what are you capable of doing? Just because you put a bullet on your resume doesn't mean that you need to be an expert in that. You have to secure the interview so that you can show people how you show up and give them the confidence that you have a strong work ethic and that you're eager and that you're excited. Those are the things employers want to see, right? So that's kind of like self-advocating, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Is it embellishing? I don't know. I did personal lines. I mean,
it's marketing.
There you go.
Well, that's like Tanya saying to me, put producer and podcast on your LinkedIn. I'm like, Tanya, we've done 1 episode. She's like,
yeah,
well,
it says it on my LinkedIn.
A podcast, right?
Yeah.
Like it's, you know,
but that's right. That's not what, and I mean, there's times where I'm like, I don't even care what's on your resume. Like I want to talk to you. I want to know you. That's what I
do that a lot.
Yeah.
Right.
But the resume
like
gets you
in
there.
the interview.
Yeah.
Yes, in the interview.
Yeah.
The resume gets you there. Yeah.
The resume is like your Google ad. You just want that person to click on it and be like, yeah, I'll interview you. So you have to make it as attractive as possible.
Yeah. It's true. But you need to advocate for yourself in writing and you need to make your resume relevant.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
For sure.
So we're coming to the end of our episode, but I do want to ask you, so we are the Risk Takers and Trailblazers podcast, and you, Jenn Devlin, are a risk taker, and it has paid off for you. So if you can give women out there, because this is a women in insurance podcast, a piece of advice on just take the risk, what would it be?
I mean, I always feel like just we touched on it earlier from when we were preparing for the podcast. My personal view has always been like, what's your safety net and what's the worst thing that can happen from trying something new?
Thank you.
I mean, that's really just it, right? Yeah. Like I'm trying to think of maybe an example or something, but I just think that be respectful of your current employer and your current colleagues. always leave on good terms, never burn a bridge, keep in touch with every person that you've ever met. I mean, not every day, but you know, like get to know people. But ultimately, like, what are you afraid of in moving forward? You work in an industry that is starved for talent. If you move on to try something new, even if it's outside of the industry, like I worked at DGA Careers for 3.5 years and was completely out of selling insurance. And then I ended up going back into a broker position before I started my own company in recruitment. And there's always those opportunities, right? Like there's so many employers looking for so many good people that I think that there's always the option to get back to what you were doing before. And so you have to decide for yourself, you know, is it worth the risk not to try this new thing?
Yeah, that's
a good way to put it. Is it worth the risk not to try it?
And what are you going to learn from it and learn about yourself?
Yes,
totally.
Is really also the other side to that. Sorry, not to add additional things to more time or more questions, but you know, I agree with the risk perspective, and you know, for my own personal reasons as well. But really, what are you're gonna learn more about yourself and the experience.
Yeah. And for women especially, this is something I hear more so from women than men. I don't want to take on the commitment of a new job right now. I have too much going on at home. And I say, well, do you work hard where you are right now? Yes. You have a strong work ethic? Yes. You work there for 7.5 hours a day? Yes. Well, then what's the problem? Like, you're just going to go and do all of that stuff without your kids for 7 hours a day somewhere else, except for your career is going to take off, and they'll still let you take your kids to the dentist. So like, don't be so scared of losing the flexibility. Almost all employers,
yes,
flexible and kind if you are a diligent employee.
Yeah.
So
okay, well, I think that's it for us. Jenn Devlin, thank you so much for everything. This has been a very insightful episode. I know we're going to get a lot of views, and the sound bits I'm going to do are going to be juicy. And we will put all of Jenn Devlin's information in our description box below. So please go check out her website, connect with her on LinkedIn. Again, build that network, start with Jenn, connect with Jenn on LinkedIn. And we just want to say thank you for tuning in and listening and watching. Guys, help me out. I'm always missing the call to actions here.
No, I think this has been great.
Right. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit that notification button so that you know when a new episode's coming. Follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram. Share with your friends. Share with everybody you know. We have lofty goals of what we want to hit, our 3-month, 6-month, and 1-year goals. And I know that we're building a pretty incredible community here. And yes, thanks for watching, and we'll see you very soon. Bye.
Bye.
thank you. Bye.